On February 26, 2026, Iran offered the largest nuclear concessions in nearly half a century, including suspension of enrichment, elimination of stockpiles, and full IAEA verification. 48 hours later, the United States and Israel launched the most significant strikes the Middle East had seen in a generation. You were told diplomacy failed. The evidence suggests the so-called Iran war was never what it appeared to be, and the proof starts with what was actually on the table. Iran's February 26 offer did not resemble a routine negotiating gesture or a recycled play from earlier nuclear talks. On that day, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, speaking for the Iranian delegation in Geneva, laid out a package whose scope was without precedent in the four-decade history of the nuclear dispute. The first plank was an immediate halt to all uranium enrichment above 3.67%, the technical threshold for civilian power reactors. This was not a temporary pause or a symbolic gesture. The suspension was to be verified by the International Atomic Energy Agency, with inspectors granted continuous access to every declared facility, including Natanz and Fordow. Second, Iran committed to diluting its entire 60% enriched uranium stockpile, roughly 400 kilograms, down to reactor-grade fuel. A process that, if completed under supervision by the International Atomic Energy Agency, would erase the material basis for any rapid weaponization. The package went further, a legally binding no stockpiling clause requiring that all enriched uranium, present and future, be converted into forms unusable for weapons and subject to real-time monitoring. Perhaps most striking, the proposal included a regional dimension never seen in prior agreements. Future nuclear fuel production would be placed under the authority of a new Arab-Iranian consortium, with a governance board drawn from Iran, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Oman, and Bahrain. Decisions would require a two-thirds majority, with both Iran and the Arab states holding effective vetoes, embedding regional transparency and mutual oversight into the heart of the program. Omani Foreign Minister Badr bin Hamad al-Busaidi, acting as mediator, described the package as unprecedented in its breadth and depth, a phrase echoed in official statements and press briefings. The technical annex obtained by the International Atomic Energy Agency detailed the monitoring architecture, satellite feeds, continuous video surveillance, and a joint verification team. In public and in private, Araghchi insisted that this was Iran's final position. There would be no further concessions. The offer was not just broad, it was designed to be irreversible. The urgency and finality were unmistakable. What then could possibly require military enforcement at the very moment the maximum offer was on the table? Authority in the Iranian system is rarely declared outright. On February 26, Ali Shamkhani, the Supreme Leader's longtime advisor and former defense minister, appeared on Al Jazeera and said that the negotiators have the authority to make decisions that will be upheld by the Supreme Leader. The phrasing was familiar. In previous nuclear talks, this language signaled more than operational leeway. It was the internal code for a direct, if unspoken, green light from the highest level. Abbas Araghchi, Iran's chief negotiator, echoed the point at his Geneva press conference and insisted that the negotiators have the full confidence of the leadership and that there is no further need for internal consultation. No sermon from Ayatollah Khamenei was broadcast. No official decree was published. Yet in Tehran's political grammar, the absence of a rebuke is a message in itself. State media remained quiet. The IRGC offered no public dissent. In the past, when the Supreme Leader disapproved, the response was swift and unmistakable, with editorials, televised warnings, or a direct statement from his office. This time, there was only silence. The phrase sufficient support and authority has a history. It was used during the final phase of the 2015 JCPOA negotiations, where it carried the weight of a signed non-firman. This continuity matters. Iranian scholars and Western diplomats alike have learned to read these signals, and when Shamkhani speaks in this register, it is understood that the Supreme Leader's blessing has been given, even if it is never spelled out on paper. On February 26, that tacit endorsement transformed the Geneva offer from a negotiator's gambit into a binding commitment. For outside actors, whether in Washington, Tel Aviv, or Riyadh, the credibility of Iran's pledge rested on this invisible but unmistakable chain of authority. The diplomatic window was not only open, it was secured at the very top. At 1:30 UTC on February 28th, the White House sent a letter of intent to the Israeli government. The document, logged in the Situation Room and later partially released under the Freedom of Information Act known as FOIA, authorized coordinated limited strikes should Iran fail to implement its nuclear commitments within 24 hours. This was not a vague warning or a gesture for the record. It was a precise legal instrument, time-stamped and routed through the chain of command, from the President, through the Secretary of Defense, to the Commander of United States Central Command. The language was careful. The objective was to be limited and proportionate, with a sharply defined target set. 12 minutes after the United States authorization, at 2:12 UTC, the Israeli National Security Council convened in the Kiryat bunker. Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, and Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi reviewed real-time satellite analysis showing Iranian missile units repositioning near Tehran. The intelligence cues included movement at the Shahid Soleimani depot, encrypted command traffic, and a diplomatic message from Oman warning that the window for a deal was closing, and these were all cited in the meeting log. At 2:12 UTC, Bennett signed the launch order for Operation Shield of Judah. The directive specified a strike on 3 hardened air defense sites and a single missile command center. The aim was to demonstrate resolve, not to inflict maximum damage. Within minutes, the order was transmitted to the Israeli Air Force Joint Operations Center. By 2:17 UTC, confirmation of receipt was logged. At 2:25 UTC, the first aircraft were airborne. The entire process, from United States legal cover to Israeli launch, unfolded in less than an hour. The chain of command was unbroken, the timeline exact. This was not a hurried response to failed talks, but a deliberate enforcement mechanism activated at the precise moment when Iran had placed its maximum offer on the table. The record leaves little room for ambiguity. The strike was timed to the diplomatic window, not to a collapse. Iran's response arrived with mathematical precision. 12 ballistic missiles launched less than an hour after the Israeli strike authorization. The targets were not chosen for maximum effect, but for maximum visibility. U.S. Navy assets in the Persian Gulf, the Saudi Aramco refinery at Ras Tanura, and a logistics hub in Abu Dhabi. Of the 12, 9 were intercepted by U.S. Aegis, Saudi Patriot, and UAE THAAD batteries. 3 failed to reach their targets. Not a single casualty was recorded. No critical infrastructure was lost. The message was unmistakable. Capability demonstrated, escalation withheld. Defense officials released interception data within hours. A 75% success rate was reported, confirmed by radar logs and satellite imagery. The remaining missiles either broke up over water or landed harmlessly in open terrain. The kinetic phase ended almost as soon as it began, with military spokespeople on all sides emphasizing restraint. No additional waves followed. No secondary targets were selected. The tempo of the exchange was tightly contained, as if bounded by an invisible set of rules. Oil markets responded in real time. Brent crude prices spiked from $81.40 to $84 per barrel, a jump of about 3%, before settling back to $82.30 by the end of the trading day. Bloomberg analysts attributed the movement to a short-term risk premium, not a disruption in physical supply or tanker flow through the Strait of Hormuz. Maritime tracking data showed normal transit volumes. The market's verdict: the exchange was a signal, not a shock. The facts leave little doubt about intent. Both the strike and the retaliation were structured to avoid lasting damage. The choreography, 12 missiles, 9 intercepts, 0 casualties, a fleeting oil price spike, suggests a controlled demonstration rather than the opening of a new war. What purpose does a missile barrage serve when its material impact is so carefully limited? The answer lies not in the destruction inflicted, but in the message delivered and received. On March 1st, foreign ministries across the Gulf issued coordinated denials. Saudi Arabia's official statement insisted that no U.S. aircraft had entered its airspace for the strikes, emphasizing the kingdom's full sovereignty. The UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait each released similar communiques, underscoring that foreign forces were not authorized to operate from their territory. These messages were not improvisations. Congressional records show that in the days leading up to the operation, Saudi and Emirati diplomats lobbied Washington to avoid escalation, citing risks to regional stability and oil market volatility. The Gulf Cooperation Council followed with a joint communique on March 2nd, stressing that security must be preserved through diplomacy, not unilateral action. Meanwhile, Oman's unique position was quietly codified behind the scenes. A leaked diplomatic cable signed by Omani Foreign Minister Badr bin Hamad al-Busaidi and his U.S. counterpart stipulated that Omani territory and diplomatic facilities would be exempt from any kinetic operation. It was a non-negotiable condition for Muscat's continued mediation. The cable's language was later mirrored in Israeli operational planning, embedding Oman's immunity into the strike protocols. The outcome? Gulf capitals projected restraint, Oman remained untouched, and the region's mediating channel was deliberately preserved. The choreography was not accidental. It was the product of a deliberate, region-wide calculation to contain escalation and protect the diplomatic process, even as military enforcement unfolded in parallel. By 2026, Iran's proxy network was battered. Hezbollah lost top commanders to Israeli and United States strikes. The Houthis saw missile arsenals shrink by 1/3, and Iraqi Popular Mobilization Forces leaders were killed in joint raids. Cyber attacks in 2025 dismantled Iranian command links, forcing Tehran toward economic deals like BRICS and Gulf overtures. In Israel, cabinet minutes from February 28th reveal leaders weighing military action as both a necessity and a political shield. The March 3rd Knesset transcript shows opposition, but polls found 57% of coalition supporters favored a strike. Netanyahu, out of office, pushed the narrative, framing enforcement as essential for Israeli unity and leverage. The architecture of force now shapes diplomacy more than any signed agreement. As regional actors recalibrate, coercion replaces consensus, quietly, methodically, and in plain sight. The question is no longer what Iran conceded, but who benefits from perpetual crisis management. In this new order, transparency remains the rarest commodity.